How is everyone today? My name is Jamie Irvin. I'm the host of the Heavy Duty Parts Report, and I'd like to just warmly welcome all of our attendees to our webinar today. Now, this webinar is hosted by the Heavy Duty Parts Report, but it is sponsored by Turbo Solutions. We've got a great lineup today of panelists, and we're going to really dig into the future of the heavy duty truck parts industry. We're going to talk about whether there should be fear or whether rather we should have a great deal of optimism for the future. And we're going to dig into some of the big core issues facing the industry, which is very exciting. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about that. And now I'd like to introduce our panel to you so that we can get our conversation going. So first of all, I'm just going to switch views here to gallery view. Welcome, panel, to the webinar. Glad to have you here. I'm going to introduce you one at a time, but glad to have you all here.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
Good morning.
All right, so let's start here. We have John Ferry, who's the Executive Vice President of Turbo Solutions. They were kind enough to sponsor today's webinar, and we're very happy to have Turbo Solutions here with us. John, Mr. Ferry, thank you for being here. And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm John Ferry, and as Jamie said, Turbo Solutions, and I'm really honored to be a part of this panel. We have some distinguished people that have a lot of good information, so thank you, Jamie.
Glad to have you here. Joshua Schwartz, now you're the Distribution Development Manager for Turbo Solutions. You play a sales role. Welcome to the webinar, Josh.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Jamie.
I think the words you were looking for were manufacturer's rep agency, which it's a lot of syllables. So thank you for the invitation. Northwest Heavy Duty is a rep agency based out in the Pacific Northwest, but we actually have personnel and are able to cover the entire industry. And our focus is on working with the four major vehicle OEMs. We call on PACCAR, Daimler, Navistar, and Volvo on behalf of a variety of suppliers. We're engaged with them on helping trucks of the future and trucks of today be safer, cleaner, and more efficient.
That's right, and that's why we're so happy to have you here, because you definitely represent the perspective of the truck OEs. But we also have James Cade here, and James is a principal in asset maintenance insights, and James really provides us with the fleet's perspective with working with fleets for over 40 years. James, welcome to the webinar. Happy to have you here.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Thanks for the invitation. And as you mentioned, I am with Asset and Maintenance Insights, and it's a consulting company mainly focused on helping fleets reduce their ROI, and not only the fleets, but also the suppliers to the fleets as well.
Fantastic. So we've got a great panel here. We're here to talk about the future of the industry. We're here to kind of disseminate whether we should be fearful of some of the changes that we see happening. Is there reason for optimism? When you really think about the future of the truck parts industry, it's by no means clear. There's changes in the political landscape. There's actions being taken to electrify the industry. We're seeing the push to eliminate carbon emissions and to, at least reduce and eventually eliminate. And all of these things have a real impact on the future. And if you're in the parts business, if you supply parts for a diesel engine, there's things to be concerned about. If you work with fleets and providing them with parts or repair services, there's implications for you. And of course, the fleets themselves have to navigate this changing landscape. So this is really the center of the conversation. This is what we want to get into. And the first main topic that we really wanted to talk about is the changes in equipment, because of course, as equipment changes, so too does the trickle-down effect in the entire supply chain in parts and service and purchasing that equipment. So I'd like to start off by asking John, in the short term, what kinds of changes do you see the truck OEs talking about making, and what are some of the long-term implications? What are the trends? From your perspective, John, that's something we want to hear about.
Well, I know that's a topic that you could explore at length and in detail. Maybe as we talk over the next hour or so, we can reference some outside sources that people can go to, because we certainly aren't capable of covering the breadth and depth of it here. But it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in the truck industry. It's an exciting time to engage with the vehicle OEMs. The types of changes that are going on are dramatic. And I have an engineering background, so maybe that makes it even more appealing to me. But to see young people come out of school with engineering degrees or backgrounds in data science and to see them attracted into our industry is really cool. It wasn't necessarily as high profile a decade or two ago, but when you have things like autonomous vehicles or clean powertrains, then you get a lot more visibility and you get some really cool suppliers coming on board. Maybe they had some automotive experience in their past, maybe they were in aerospace, but now they see trucking as a landscape where they can really have an impact. And I think it feels good. They know that freight movement is essential to the US economy and our way of life. And if they can, again, make it safer, cleaner, or more productive, then there's a value proposition and there's money to be made. So to get down to some more of the specifics, yes, you've seen the headlines and they're real. Electrification is happening. Research into autonomous vehicles is happening, and it has affected each of the OEMs. It's driven them to create partnerships where maybe they've partnered up with Toyota to understand hydrogen fuel cells. Maybe it's partnering with Ford to do the same thing. You have a global network of suppliers, places like Israel, that are leaders in LiDAR technology. We're reaching out to them to understand how we can add additional safety features to the vehicles. You have a truck plant in Portland, Oregon, a historical truck plant. That's where Freightliner Trucks was founded decades ago. They had a unique mission to create a truck for the West Coast operating environment. That truck plant in Portland is being reconfigured to 100% to produce electric vehicles, right? Other Daimler plants in Mexico and on the East Coast will continue to do the vast majority of production. But there's a team of engineers and manufacturing people and suppliers all banding together to support this. So it's not just a headline, it's real. But let me close with this and want to share the wealth here. We can all be part of this conversation. Go online to like Dieselformorg, which is the website for the Diesel Technology Forum. They will be very quick to remind you there are 10 million diesel-powered vehicles on the road today in class 3 through 8 applications, right? And I love mathematics. Do the math, right? There are a lot of diesel vehicles on the road today, and the vast majority of them are safe and they are clean. They're going to continue to serve a vital role for decades to come. I heard someone last week say, if you're entering the industry today as, say, a driver, and so picture somebody who's 20 years old, right? You will be able to retire in this industry. So okay. There's some perspective.
That's definitely and that was dieselforum.org?
That is correct.
Okay, so Taryn, our producer, he's in the background. Taryn, can you go into the chat and just put in dieselforum.org, like the actual hyperlink, so that all of our panelists can click through to it and get access to that? So, okay, so that's a little bit of context from the truck OE's perspective. So now I'm kind of thinking about the fleet, and I'd like to hear from James. So when the fleets are looking at all these media announcements, they're seeing the rollout of these new vehicles, new technology. What's the perspective there on how and how are they navigating making decisions about what equipment they're going to buy now and then in the next few years?
Well, John's hit on a very important point, and that is that it's some of the discussions that are going on internally in fleets is making sure that drivers and technicians understand that they're still going to have jobs for a long time. This transition to electric will happen. I'm convinced it'll happen, but it's going to be a slow evolution, and it'll take some time. nothing else to get the infrastructure in place. Pessimistic people or view on it say that only 6% of new vehicle production by 2025 will be electric. Now, on the other side of the coin, the optimistic are saying this could be as high as 25%. Reality, it'll probably be somewhere in between. But again, it's something you have to keep your eye on. But one of the points I wanted to make on this was that for parts suppliers or anybody in the industry, quite honestly, is that when you talk about short-term and long-term, that definition is changing. And what I mean by that is that the life cycles of products are shrinking. I was on a Meritor council meeting, fleet council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and one of the moderators made a point. They were talking about their axles. And, several years ago or 10, 15 years ago, they were talking about when they designed a axle, they had a life expectancy of being in production for 20 to 30 years with that axle. Today, they're designing axles for a life spanning 5 to 7 years. That's a huge change. Huge change for the suppliers and a huge change for fleets on knowing what to equip with their vehicle. So, I think for a fleet today, the most important thing to do or think about is being flexible. Again, I think it's making sure that you're flexible in your approach to things as far as specs, vehicle specs, as well as technology, and being open to new technology. As John mentioned, our industry is going through some tremendous changes, all due to advances in technology. In fact, I saw, John, you may have more information on this than I do, but I heard the other day or saw some information the other day that new vehicle production is being slowed down right now because of a lack of semiconductors in the industry. Think about that 5-7 years ago. Is that slowing down a truck production because you don't have access to semiconductors? That's crazy.
We wouldn't have had the language to describe the issue back then, I don't think.
Right. That's right.
That's true. Right. Yeah. So this is giving us a good place to start from. So if you're feeling, to the listeners, if you're feeling like things are dynamic and they're changing like never before in the industry, you've got confirmation that that's not just a feeling that you're experiencing. This is something everyone is. So, John from Turbo Solutions, you're in charge of running a company that manufactures turbochargers for this industry. And as you look to the future, what is your perspective on how things are changing, and how does that impact someone like yourself who runs a company that traditionally has focused on something specifically for diesel engines?
What we see is, number one, we're remanufacturers, and, our background is that, we remanufactured drivetrain at one time, and we remanufactured turbochargers. So remanufacturers are what James was talking about. We're very flexible. Today, what I see out there in the industry is that business is very good, and thank God it's very good for us. But the fact is that people are going through a lot of issues today in the short term. This shortage of chips, as they were talking about, or technology that's holding up trucks. We hear people talking about things on back order that were never on back order before. And of course, the other issue is people. Everybody's trying to find a solution to find the right people. And, John was talking about some of the high level engineers and some of the other people coming into the business. But what we see when we go to the dealerships and to the parts distributors is, the laborers, the counter people, the salespeople, everybody's looking for people. So, I think that from our perspective, I think we're in a great business. I think the business is going to be driven for a long time by turbochargers. And like everybody else, we're flexible, and we want to really understand the timing of what is happening.
Right. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But just before we move on from this topic, Josh, you're in the field, you're talking to people directly. What are some of the feedback that you've been getting about how people are handling the changes of equipment that are coming, and what kind of decisions are they making? I'd like to hear kind of from your perspective of in the field.
So yeah, a lot of stuff what we're seeing in the field. I'm blessed to be able to go out with our customers and call in their customers, and get a true diversification of as far as fleets, ranging in various sizes. And I'm noticing, obviously with the municipality, the government-owned fleets, you are starting to see some electrification integration. Tucson, for example, just got their first electric fire truck, and it's one of 4 in the world. Here on the first one in the United States. So you're starting to see some electrification, but a lot of that is really bearing on government, whether it be local, federal subsidies. And yes, it makes up a small percentage of their fleet, but the other 85%, the other 90% of their fleet is a diesel engine. And that's, what I really focus on is, yes, it is, like you said, it is coming, but there's so much out there in the fleet, and the demand now too, we're starting to see the shift too. I mean, we're not just talking heavy duty. We're starting to see fleets expand into medium duty too. And so there are still quite a bit of medium duty diesel applications out there as well. So, I'm just we try to have a pivot point. And I go back to look at technology too. I remember 10 years ago, big thing was about, hybrid diesel technology. And I don't think we're any further today than where we were when that truck showed up to the White House and President Obama looked at that truck. And, so it's a slow transition. And like everybody said here, it is coming. But, I think the good thing is build that relationship with our partners, build that relationship. If you got that relationship, you can always sell and pivot at a later point.
Right, and maintain that flexibility. And Josh, you bring up a good point about the role that government plays in mandating some of these things. And we're kind of moving on to our second main topic, which is the impact of the move away from carbon emissions and how that is being driven by government and they're mandating certain things. So James, how are fleets reacting to the changes? So for example, we just had like a recent cancellation of a major pipeline. This affects the US and Canada. How does a fleet that's perhaps over the road view those kinds of high level changes in policy by governments? Does it impact them at all? Or is it really just something that is only affecting people in that specific industry? I just kind of like get a sense of where fleets, how they look at these kind of large sweeping changes in policy from government.
Well, it has a big impact, because if you look at diesel fuel, for example, just the price of diesel fuel, it's been an age-old problem, goes back many years. There's been a lot of volatility around diesel prices, and if you just go back and look at, July of 2020, to today, the price of a gallon of diesel fuel has gone up by 80 cents a gallon. And when you look at a vehicle operating 100,000 miles a year, making 7 miles per gallon, that increases the overall operating cost of that vehicle by $11,400 each year. And that's just one truck. So you take that across the number of trucks that John was talking about, that's a huge shift, a huge change. So it is the political climate does have a big impact on it. And, I think that's the probably from a political point of view, that's really what's driving some of this changes. If you look at the states and the federal level, a lot of regulations around requiring the use of electric trucks in the future. In fact, if you go out and look at just Google the California Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, or the California Advanced Clean Fleets pending resolutions that are probably be out later this year, kind of gives you an idea of what's going on at state level. California, of course, is leading the effort, leading the charge, but there's 15 other states that have signed a memo of understanding with California saying that they're going to mirror their regulations in the future. It's kind of a non-binding issue, but again, 15 states have said that they are going to follow and look what California is doing. And California basically is saying by 2035, they want every possible truck, a piece of equipment in California to be electric. And that's a big undertaking. It's a big challenge. And one that we're all scrambling, I think, is as fleets to try and understand and how to meet. But it's again, some of the numbers I've quoted before about the projections. Again, that all could be changed tomorrow if there's a big breakthrough in technology on batteries, for example. I mean, the whole dynamic could shift if that happens. But for fleets and their suppliers, I think the biggest thing is looking at as this industry changes in water, is making sure is that they're stocking the right parts, and keeping an eye on obsolescence, because it is changing. It is changing so fast that a good part today may sitting on your inventory may be obsolete within a couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on right now that are impacting supply chain management. And John from Northwest, I was going to ask you, so how do the truck OEs kind of look at these larger issues when it comes to the government kind of mandating some of these changes? Of course, they have to manufacture to meet those mandates, but are they looking at those changes in policy from the government, and does that inform their decisions directly on how they're going to go about manufacturing what vehicles? What's the overall perspective for them when they're looking at these changes?
Well, Jamie, I certainly don't pretend to speak for them, but I've observed quite a bit, and the truck OEMs certainly pay attention to the regulations. In fact, wherever possible, they try to influence those regulations, right? But that hasn't been very successful. You not only do the truck OEMs keep a close watch on Washington, I think it's fair to say they keep a very close eye on California, as Jim alluded to, and they're keeping one eye on Europe. You have it. It's not necessarily top of mind for us, but more trucks are built in the rest of the world than are built in North America, and those trucks in the rest of the world are largely a reflection of European design standards and European economic influences. So if you see trends in Europe and Asia, it's likely that they will have a landing place here at some time in the future. So yes, the OEMs look at that very, very carefully. And here's the but, it's a big one. The government, for the most part, doesn't buy the trucks. Okay, the vehicle OEMs, be it Packard, Daimler, Volvo, or Navistar, their first concern is to satisfy their existing customer base and to meet their needs. So they care a lot more about what the fleets are telling them than they do about what is going on from a policy perspective. Obviously, everybody has to watch policy and play that mental chess game. If they do this, what am I going to do? But let me throw out a fleet as an example. PepsiCo is perhaps the largest private fleet in North America. It's certainly a well-respected, very large organization. They're not making a wholesale switch over to electric vehicles anytime soon, but they've invested a significant amount of money in their facility in Modesto, California, as a pilot project. Every single vehicle, I think, or at least a good portion of them on that site, whether it's a heavy-duty truck or a forklift, they're converting it and electrifying it. And they had to put in infrastructure equivalent to that of a small hospital, right? That's how much energy is being consumed by those vehicles. That was infrastructure that didn't exist. So they had to work with local utilities, and then they had designed all the charging equipment, bring all these new suppliers in. They're doing it to be informed. They're doing it to learn about this trend. They're not standing up and saying today, to my knowledge, what percentage of their vehicles will be electrified by a certain date, but they've committed themselves to learning about it. And of course, that just pulls the vehicle OEMs right into the conversation. And you know, EPA might have said one thing, CARB might have said another, but when Pepsi says, we need your help, that's when the vehicle OEMs respond.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. You know, Josh, I think it's important for us to also touch on just the perspective of the people who are kind of in the middle of that, whether it's a dealership or it's a distributor of parts. I think of in the past, and I think looking at history, it's always it can be a good indication of what cycles we will see in the future. And I think of like when the railroad in the 19th century, right? They had this big mission. They went across the entire country. And then in the 20th century, when commercial airlines came in, you would have thought that all of those railway companies would have just transitioned to flying in the air, because it was kind of the same grand mission of moving people and moving freight around, moving things around the country. And that just didn't happen. And then I think of like at the end of the 20th century, when we have this, the internet creates the opportunity for a company like Amazon to come in and completely disrupt B2C retail. And you would have thought that those retailers would have been the first ones to put their hands up and say, I want that technology and I want to serve our existing customers in that new way. And that didn't happen. Are you seeing people in the truck repair, the truck service, the truck parts supply part of the business responding to all of these changes in a proactive way? Are people fearful? Do they not know what to do? Like what has been your experience when you talk to people firsthand? What's the general viewpoint and how are they approaching it?
I think it's really the opportunity to add value for their organization to their customer. You're seeing a lot more as we get newer technicians come in on the diesel engine side. You're seeing them utilize smartphones more. Online ordering, that technology has come a long ways, even from many customers I've dealt with even in the last 2 years. So I mean, they're starting to pivot there. And in regards to the electrification, it's a learning curve, but they're trying to position themselves in a position where they can pivot. And they're not the stronger guys, and they're enhancing their business. They're researching more and getting involved. And one of the things that we like to do at Turbo Solutions, it's in our name, is provide a solution. And obviously, I know there is not a solution for a turbo on an electrified truck. But we can provide a lot of other solutions for the customer. And there's hurdles, and that's the important thing, is understand the hurdles that are coming for electrification too. One of the things I get out in the field that a customer recently shared with me is, yes, they've got this van trailer that's loaded with batteries, and the truck weighs more because it's electric. It now takes away from the load capacity that truck can haul. So, electrification, it's not perfect. And if you look at especially what we've seen with the supply chain, there are way few suppliers that can generate and replicate these batteries globally. So you look at the supply chain that we're having right now on everything from toothpicks to turbos, everything in between. When you eliminate the amount of suppliers, there's a lot of fear in that. So we're seeing the pivot point. So it's understanding the hurdles for electrification too. That I think is really important that they're capturing as well.
Right.
And how they're going to solve that.
Yeah. And John from Turbo Solutions, you're an executive, you're responsible for leading a company. When you think about those kinds of pivots that may be required, how do you view that today? Because obviously we don't have a perfect crystal ball, and it's impossible to know exactly what pivots will be required. But from an executive leadership perspective, like how do you approach that on a day-to-day basis right now?
Well, basically, I think that, the biggest thing for everybody that I talk to is they know it's coming. They know that there's going to be changes to the drivetrain to the engines, but they don't know the timing of it. And one of the reasons why, when we got together and we talked about sponsoring and participating in this event, was to try to give people a little bit of assurance that diesel engines are going to be around for a long time. And, even though these changes are coming, I think that one of the discussions that we were having were, natural gas was supposed to be a much bigger factor than it actually became in the last decade. So there's always that question of, what if, are these things going to happen? Are they going to happen tomorrow, or is it more long range? And when I hear John and James talking about, coming in as a 20-year-old and having a future until retirement, I think that really sums up, how we should approach this. But look, everybody has to be flexible. Everybody has to understand that nobody knows the answers. When you take a look at the technology, the changes that have taken place since I was 20 in this business.
Which is only a couple of years ago, right, John?
Yeah, it was only a couple of years ago, but it is amazing. And just the way we communicate, we started putting instructions in our boxes with QR codes so that people can watch videos on how to install our turbos. These were things that were unthought of. So today the changes are coming. I have great optimism, just for the record, for the truck parts industry. It's a great industry. I believe it'll always be around, and it's going to provide some great careers for people that are coming into the industry now.
But yeah, and just going back to that idea of like some of these companies in the past or these industries in the past that didn't respond to the change, we don't have to repeat that. We can be flexible and pivot, and we can be proactive, and we can take advantage of opportunities to service customers in a more complete capacity and leverage all the changes. So instead of looking at it from a place of fear, if we change our viewpoint of that and look to it optimistically for the future, then there's many opportunities for us to shift our business models and to be able to not just survive all these changes, but thrive in the future. So let's talk about the new
one point I would add is
sure,
that,
James.
To all this discussion is that we're talking about powertrain changes. Yes, that's coming or whatever, but all the other basic systems on the vehicle, brakes, tires, lights, that'll all still be there. So it'll still be a challenge of maintaining and repairing those systems above and beyond just the electric chassis.
Yeah, agreed. Like, as long as we're using wheels to roll things along the ground, fundamentally, many of these things will stay the same. And honestly, even if we did eventually in the far distant future have technology that allowed things to fly around in space, those things would still break down. We'd still need parts. So if we're focused on that, we'd still be in business 100 years from now. At least our predecessors would be.
Jamie, one more thing that I want to add to it is that, the one thing that I'm really confident of is that our business is always going to be about the customer and who can take care of the customer and do a better job of it. That's not going away. Taking care of the customer, I think it's more today than just selling parts. When I take a look at some of the industry leaders, they don't just supply parts, they provide information, and they're a great resource. And trust me, that's going to continue.
Yeah.
So maybe I can piggyback on that comment. I think you made an excellent comment, John. As I look at the group shot here, I think four of us fall into the category of business owners, and we understand that if you aren't constantly educating yourself, if you're not taking care of the customer, to your point, John, but if you're not aware of industry trends and where things are going, then you're at a huge disadvantage. You cannot allow yourself to stagnate. Your competitors are not. So this is where I want to put in a plug for continuous education and for taking advantage of some of the forums that are out there in the heavy-duty truck industry. I put into the chat a link for the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, which is NACFE. Dave Schaller and Mike Routh and those guys just do a phenomenal job of surveying trends like electrification. If you want some real hard numbers, take a look at the work they're doing, whether it's long haul, medium, or other types of activities. They really are doing good work. And I saw that Jill Gingrich and a few other people who are active in TMC are among our attendees today. TMC is another phenomenal gathering place where Jim and I have both been in leadership capacities, where fleets and vehicle suppliers and component suppliers all get in the same room to discuss best practices. And you might have thought of that organization because of the name, that it was all about maintenance, but it does have a blended focus, right? They do have a forum to talk about future trucks and what is coming down the pipeline. And so I highly endorse both. Those are just two of the forums, but I think they're two of the best that will give you actionable information, whether you are in the parts business or running a fleet or developing vehicles. Any of those, you're gonna find value there.
Yeah, I would endorse the TMC specifically because you're not sitting on the sidelines. You get involved directly into the discussions and get directly involved with the people that are making decisions. You have your voice heard as a fleet. And I recommend for any fleet out there that is not involved in TMC today, at least get involved, be a part of the group and part of the discussion.
Yeah, and I'll say from the Heavy Duty Parts Report's perspective, we've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people, and TMC is the number one most mentioned resource across, from manufacturers, from distributors, from dealers, from fleets. This is the one place where it just gets repeated over and over again because of the value they bring the industry. So this is a great resource for all of us. As we move into the new normal, I think of our predecessors before us who dealt with so much change in their lifespan. Those are the people that maybe were mentors to us, and then we've had to navigate this digital and electrification. And our successors, they're going to see the end of that transformation into full electrification and carbon emissions being reduced to zero. But in the foreseeable future, John, from Northwest, what is the curve for the decline of diesel engines going to look like? Could you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Sure. Let me find that crystal ball.
Golly. I'm glad I didn't get that question.
Well, I'll give you a couple pieces of information. They're going to be subjective, and they certainly don't amount to a forecast. But I was engaged in a conversation 2 weeks ago with one of the vehicle OEMs. They have a large workforce dedicated to diesel engine technology, and they are actively engaged in the emission solutions for those vehicles 10 years from now. Okay. The idea that a 13-liter or 15-liter diesel is not the powertrain of choice for long distance freight haul, there is no replacement for that. The caveat is if somebody comes up with new battery chemistry, and people are working like mad on that. But anybody that's been in the battery business will tell you it is a killer business. It is difficult to create a breakthrough battery technology. Don't hold your breath. There are a lot of resources being applied to it. It's kind of like the space race of the 1950s and 60s. So believe me, there could be new battery chemistry out there 10 years, 20 years from now. But it's going to have its biggest impact first in light vehicles and in medium duty vehicles. It's going to have an impact in particular regions, urban, densely populated urban centers, where you have, a bad geographic scenario going on, like the Los Angeles basin. That's where electrification makes sense first, and you'll see the most rapid adoption. When it comes to moving freight, though, and we all depend on freight being moved from coast to coast, border to border, it's going to be long distance trucks hauling that freight. Airplanes are not a suitable alternative. Trains work for bulk commodities. They don't work for a high value, compact freight. So diesel trucks are going to be around a long, long time. I told you that one of the OEMs is actively developing technology for the emissions regulations that they are expecting. That's in 2024, 2027. Those are new hurdles for clean diesels, clean trucks, I should say. Also, if you look at the Wall Street Journal, you saw recently that Daimler is getting out of the medium-duty diesel business. That sounds, wait a minute, why are they backing away from it? Well, look at the flip side of that story. They're handing it over to Cummins. Cummins sees a huge opportunity for a long period of time building, selling, and servicing diesel engines. Daimler is simply making a statement that given their limited resources, they're going to focus on the trucks and they're outsourcing the engines. It's not a move away from diesel engines. So I hope that helps, Jamie. I'm not going to give you a forecast. As soon as I do, it's going to be wrong.
Oh, I heard all diesel engines are gone from the planet by 2050, but anyway. Okay, so James, from the fleet's perspective too, there's some challenges that affect them depending on what vocation they're in. Like, what are just some of the challenges that will actually prevent the complete elimination of diesel, at least in the foreseeable future?
Well, I agree with John, is that diesel is going to be around for a long, long time, probably even past 2050 in some applications. But
oh, you're okay. Now he's taking it, and now he's adding his stamp on that prediction.
But I think that what you'll see is more of a less dominance by diesel in the industry and it'll be a gradual thing going forward. But for fleets, you're looking at what electric, everybody, I have a lot of work done in the behind the scenes on electric, working with utilities and OEMs and others, battery suppliers, looking at where this is going. And a lot of the challenges right now, at least in the foreseeable future, is range. And to John's point, is the reason diesel will be the dominant player in the marketplace for many years to come is because of the range issue. You take a truck, diesel powered truck today, and you don't want to drive it all that way, but you could probably definitely get 1,000 miles easy before you have to refuel. With a electric truck today, you're talking about 150, 200 miles is it. And then you have to recharge. So again, range is one of the big issues. The other one is infrastructure. Today is, you mentioned earlier about CNG. One of the challenges that CNG had was the infrastructure. Electricity is going to have the same issues. You can't just pull your truck over somewhere into a truck stop and plug in and recharge today. It just doesn't exist. And that's going to be a challenge. So I agree with the comments that John made about regional operations, local operations will be where electric makes its inroads first, and until the range issue becomes less of an issue. Infrastructure will develop over time, but the range issue is probably the biggest limiting factor today.
All right, that sounds great. So I'd like to now make sure, I think we've done a great job of covering a lot of the high level issues, but I'd like to give our audience a bit of a roadmap. So in the short term, this is just an open question. What advice do you have for a company that sells parts today? How do they, in the short term, make sure that they are successful? So I just throw that out to anyone. John from Northwest?
Well, I'll make it quick because I see Mr. Ferry wants to make a comment as well. One thing we haven't talked about at all is data. The addition of sensors, the network on the vehicle, the telematics aspect, and I wouldn't overlook that. If you have a device that's going onto a vehicle, and if it's able to do predictive diagnostics, if you know in advance that a bearing's getting hot, or you have an electrical short in a coil, and you're able to identify that failure and communicate it outside of the device, there is going to be a lot of value associated with that. And that's just one example. Jim could give you many, many more of how a sophisticated fleet leverages data to optimize their operation. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. So it's not just all about powertrain and electrification. There's some other big changes in technology that needs to be addressed.
It's a different world, Jamie. My daughter is only 5 years out of college, and she already regrets her choice of major, right? And she talks about computational linguistics, and I'm like, what the heck is that, right?
Yeah.
But data has absolutely transformed our entire world, and certainly has caused a revolution in the truck industry.
Yeah, and some people feel like we've been at it for a while. We're still in the infancy of that transformation. John from Turbo Solutions, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I do, Jamie. I guess my input on that would be that I think that parts companies today really have to be open-minded, to what they're doing. And, just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work going forward. And somebody a lot smarter than me at one point made a comment that, a good way to be successful is see what other people do to be successful and do it even better. And today, the leaders in the industry that I rub elbows with and talk to, they're so enlightening because they are willing to reinvent themselves, whether they go into different product lines or they add an additional service for their customer. Look at what the customer's asking for. And if it doesn't line up with what you did in the past, be honest with yourself and go through the changes that are going to sustain your business well into the future. So be open-minded, be flexible. I think about one company that when it comes to technology completely changed in my lifetime, which was Bendix. Back in the day when I got to know who Bendix was, they were a brake company. Part of their evolution was anti-lock. And from anti-lock, they took that and became really a safety company in many ways, whether it's anti-jackknife or whether it's lane control. But they really reinvented themselves into a need for their customer base. And I don't have to tell you that they've been very successful doing it.
Yeah. I know from my perspective, one of the things that I have seen is nobody's just going to come out and be like, yeah, I'm terrified, and that's completely paralyzed me from moving forward, especially if you're the leader of a company. But sometimes what we say and then what we do kind of tell a different story. And so if we are finding ourselves having difficulty accepting some of these changes that are coming in our industry and moving forward, to your point, John, from Turbo Solutions, there's so many great leaders and so many people that we can talk to. And there's so many resources available. And sometimes all we have to do is just change our perspective. We don't even have to change anything physically ourselves, just our perspective. And that can start us down a road of transformation and reinvention that is going to be focused on the customer. And I think if we focus on the customer, that's where we find all the opportunity and where the optimism can really come from. And James, I know in our conversations in the past, you set up your consulting company for fleets, but you actually work with suppliers as well for the simple fact that you can inform them of what the customers are really looking for. So from your perspective, what advice do you have?
Well, I think it's said earlier is that for a fleet or suppliers to be flexible as well as being open to technology and changes. One of expanding on what John was talking about as far as data, I think this we've just barely touched the surface of what data can do for our industry, and it has the opportunity to be a really disruptive force in our industry for good and for bad, I guess, depending on your point of view. But it could revolutionize the way we do a lot of things. To Jamie's point or to John's point regarding the bearing that needs to be replaced. The fleet is going to expect or should expect if they have that notification that when they need it, that bearing is going to be there, not a day or two or whatever. It has to be there right then and there. So again, is merging the data with the supply chain, I think, is going to be critical, and especially with fleets going forward, because they're under tremendous pressure to maximize vehicle uptime. And a lot of fleets are looking at data management as being a way to improve the overall vehicle uptime. And they're going to look for their parts suppliers to fall directly in line with that as well.
Yeah, what business are you in, right? Like sometimes people get focused on the thing that they sell, but that's not the business you're in. I personally think efficiency and predictive maintenance, these are two massive areas of huge opportunity. What says you to the panel? How would you respond to that?
I think to an extent, Jim already addressed it, and I couldn't agree more. All of the vehicle OEMs, if you go on their websites, you're going to see a reference to vehicle uptime. That's their mission, that's their goal, that's what they support, that's what they believe in, et cetera. They spin it a little different ways, but the bottom line, they want their customers to know that they are there to maximize vehicle uptime.
And there's a big opportunity in the aftermarket to leverage this technology as it becomes more prolific, to be able to support the second, third owners in a similar way with that focus on uptime. Josh, as you travel around the country, I'm sure you see those opportunities starting to expand and grow.
Yeah, one of the things that's really cool, and there's a lot of other great companies out there too that they're providing solutions in the aftermarket that address those concerns. One of those being diesel laptops. I'm seeing that with, and giving customers resources out that they don't currently have in the aftermarket is just astonishing. So it's a great thing, and I've actually seen one. It was a prototype from a manufacturer, and I apologize, I don't remember the manufacturer's name, but literally the technician put a headset on, and it was augmented reality. So it was literally, they could look at the engine, they could look at the turbo, they could look at the alternator, and they'd get a part number, a price, and how they could order it. And they could literally just do it from a click on the top of the headset. So that efficiency alone helps with uptime. It helps the whole transition of the industry. And, one of the things that going out in the field with our customers and learning from their customers, a lot of times the fleets, it's making that pivot too from short haul, going from long haul to short haul. You're seeing more and more demand for, Amazon. They used to be 2 day, now they're 1 day, and everybody wants that faster and faster and faster. And that dynamic is changing so much. And even UPS and FedEx are having a hard time, with sustaining their existing model. So it's really that pivot point, and what the suppliers can bring, or what the manufacturers and the companies can bring.
Yeah. Well, I think I really hope we've given the audience a lot to think about. And really, I think the message from everyone is we need to, keep looking at things from a realistic perspective of the trends. Yes, things are changing. And yes, it's probably changing faster than we've ever experienced before. But that doesn't mean there's reason for a lot of fear. Rather, in our industry, there is reason for optimism. Do I have everyone's vote on that?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. You can watch our next video. Make sure to click the like button, write a comment, and don't forget to subscribe.